Norman came on to America and I went to Corsica. We wrote each other a few times. I confided to Norman that I was very apprehensive about the reception of Giovanni's room, and he was good enough to write some very encouraging things about it when it came out. The critics had jumped on him with both their left feet when he published The Deer Park, which I still had not read, and this created a kind of bond, or strengthened the bond already existing between us. About a year and several overflowing wastebaskets later, I, too, returned to America, not vastly improved by having been out of it, but not knowing where else to go. And one day, while I was sitting dully in my house, Norman called me from Connecticut. A few people were going to be there for the weekend, and he wanted me to come too. We had not seen each other since Paris. Well, I wanted to go, that is. I wanted to see Norman. But I did not want to see any people, and so the tone of my acceptance was not very enthusiastic. I realized that he felt this, but I did not know what to do about it. He gave me train schedules and hung up. Getting to Connecticut would have been no hassle if I could have pulled myself together to get to the train. And I was sorry, as I meandered around my house and time flew and trains left, that I had not been more honest with Norman and told him exactly how I felt. But I had not known how to do this, or it had not really occurred to me to do it, especially not over the phone. So there was another phone call. I forget who called whom, which went something like this. "Don't feel you have to. I'm not trying to bug you. It's not that. It's just, you don't really want to come, do you? I don't really feel up to it." "I understand. I guess you just don't like the Connecticut gentry." "Well, don't you ever come to the city?" "Sure. We'll see each other." "I hope so. I'd like to see you." "Okay, till then." And he hung up. I thought I ought to write him a letter, but of course I did nothing of the sort. It was around this time I went south, I think. Anyway, we did not see each other for a long time. But I thought about him a great deal. The grapevine keeps all of us advised of the other's movements, so I knew when Norman left Connecticut for New York, heard that he had been present at this or that party, and what he had said. Usually something rude, often something penetrating, sometimes something so hilariously silly that it was difficult to believe he had been serious. This was my reaction when I first heard his famous running for president remark. I dismissed it. I was wrong. Or he had been seen in this or that village spot, in which unfailingly there would be someone, out of spite, idleness, envy, exasperation, out of the bottomless, eerie, aimless hostility which characterizes almost every bar in New York, to speak only of bars, to put him down. I heard of a couple of fistfights, and, of course, I was always encountering people who hated his guts. These people always mildly surprised me, and so did the news of his fights. It was hard for me to imagine that anyone could really dislike Norman, anyone, that is, who had encountered him personally. I knew of one fight he had had, forced on him, apparently, by a blowhard village type whom I considered rather pathetic. I didn't blame Norman for this fight, but I couldn't help wondering why he bothered to rise to such a shapeless challenge. It seemed simpler, as I was always telling myself, just to stay out of village bars. And people talked about Norman with a kind of avid glee, which I found very ugly. Pleasure made their saliva flow, they sprayed and all but drooled, and their eyes shone with that bloodlust which is the only real tribute the mediocre are capable of bringing to the extraordinary. Many of the people who claimed to be seeing Norman all the time impressed me as being, to tell the truth, pitifully far beneath him. But this is also true, alas, of much of my own entourage. The people who are in one's life, or merely continually in one's presence, reveal a great deal about one's needs and terrors, also one's hopes. I was not, however, on the scene. I was on the road, not quite, I trust, in the sense that Kerouac's boys are, but I presented certainly a moving target. And I was reading Norman Mailer. Before I had met him, I had only read The Naked and the Dead, The White Negro, and Barbary Shore. I think this is right, though it may be that only I read The White Negro later and confused my reading of that piece with some of my discussions with Norman. Anyway, I could not, with the best will in the world, make any sense out of The White Negro, and, in fact, it was hard for me to imagine that this essay had been written by the same man who wrote the novels. Both The Naked and the Dead, and, for the most part, Barbary Shore, are written in a lean, spare, muscular prose, which accomplishes almost exactly what it sets out to do. Even Barbary Shore, which loses itself in its last half, and which deserves, by the way, far more serious treatment than it has received, never becomes as downright impenetrable as The White Negro does. Now, much of this, I told myself, had to do with my resistance to the title, and with a kind of fury that so antique a vision of the black should, at this late hour, and in so many borrowed heirlooms, be stepping off her train. But I was also baffled by the passion with which Norman appeared to be imitating so many people inferior to himself, i.e., Kerouac and all the other Suzuki rhythm boys. From them, indeed, I expected nothing more than their pabloom-clogged cries of kicks and holy. It seemed very clear to me that their glorification of the orgasm was but a way of avoiding all of the terrors of life and love. But Norman knew better, had to know better. The Naked and the Dead, Barbary Shore, and The Deer Park proved it. In each of these novels, there is a toughness and subtlety of conception, and a sense of the danger and complexity of human relationships which one will search for in vain, not only in the work produced by the aforementioned coterie, but in most of the novels produced by Norman's contemporaries. What in the world, then, was he doing, slumming so outrageously in such a dreary crowd? For, exactly because he knew better, and in exactly the same way that no one can become more lewdly vicious than an imitation libertine, Norman felt compelled to carry their mystique further than they had, to be more hip, or more beat, to dominate, in fact, their dreaming field. And since this mystique depended on a total rejection of life, and insisted on the fulfillment of an infantile dream of love, the mystique could only be extended into violence. No one is more dangerous than he who imagines himself pure in heart, for his purity, by definition, is unassailable. But why should it be necessary to borrow the depression language of deprived Negroes, which eventually evolved into jive and bob talk, in order to justify such a grim system of delusions? Why malign the sorely menaced sexuality of Negroes in order to justify the white man's own sexual panic? Especially as, in Norman's case, and as indicated by his work, he has a very real sense of sexual responsibility, and even, odd as it may sound to some, of sexual morality and a genuine commitment to life. None of his people, I beg you to notice, spends their lives on this road. They really become entangled with each other and with life. They really suffer. They spill real blood. They have real lives to lose. This is no small achievement. In fact, it is absolutely rare. No matter how uneven one judges Norman's work to be, all of it is genuine work. No matter how harshly one judges it, it is the work of a genuine novelist and an absolutely first-rate talent. Which makes the question I've tried to raise, or rather, the questions which Norman Mailer irresistibly represents, all the more troubling and terrible. I certainly do not know the answers, and even if I did, this is probably not the place to state them. But I have a few ideas. Here is Kerouac, ruminating on what I take to be the loss of the Garden of Eden. In lilac evening, I walked with every muscle aching among the lights of 27th and Welton in the Denver-colored section, wishing I were a Negro, feeling that the best the white world had offered was not enough ecstasy for me, not enough life, joy, kicks, darkness, music, not enough night. I wished I were a Denver Mexican, or even a poor overworked Jap, anything but what I so drearily was, a white man disillusioned. All my life, I'd had wide ambitions. I passed the dark porches of Mexican and Negro homes. Soft voices were there, occasionally the dusky knee of some mysterious sensuous gal, and dark faces of the men behind rose arbors. Little children sat like sages in ancient rocking chairs. Now, this is absolute nonsense, of course, objectively considered, and offensive nonsense at that. I would hate to be in Kerouac's shoes if he should ever be mad enough to read this aloud from the stage of Harlem's Apollo Theater. And yet, there is real pain in it, and real loss, however thin, and it is thin, like soup too long diluted, thin because it does not refer to reality, but to a dream. Compare it, at random, with any old blues. Backwater blues done caused me to pack my things and go, 'cause my house fell down, and I can't live there no more. Man, said a Negro musician to me once, talking about Norman, the only trouble with that cat is that he's white. This does not mean exactly what it says, or rather, it does mean exactly what it says, and not what it might be taken to mean. And it is a very shrewd observation. What my friend meant was that to become a Negro man, let alone a Negro artist, one had to make oneself up as one went along. This had to be done in the not at all metaphorical teeth of the world's determination to destroy you. The world had prepared no place for you, and if the world had its way, no place would ever exist. Now, this is true for everyone, but in the case of a Negro, this truth is absolutely naked. If he deludes himself about it, he'll die. This is not the way this truth presents itself to white men who believe the world is theirs, and who, albeit unconsciously, expect the world to help them in the achievement of their identity. But the world does not do this. For anyone, the world is not interested in anyone's identity, and therefore the anguish which can overtake a white man comes in the middle of his life, when he must make the almost inconceivable effort to divest himself of everything he has ever expected or believed, when he must take himself apart and put himself together again, walking out of the world into limbo, or into what certainly looks like limbo. This cannot yet happen to any Negro of Norman's age, for the reason that his delusions and defenses are either absolutely impenetrable by this time, or he has failed to survive them. I want to know how power works, Norman once said to me, how it really works, in detail. Well, I know how power works. It has worked on me. And if I didn't know how power worked, I would be dead. And it goes without saying, perhaps, that I have simply never been able to afford myself any illusions concerning the manipulation of that power. By revenge, I decided very early, would be to achieve a power which outlasts kingdoms.